please tell us a bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure. Well, I've been interested in caves since I was a little boy. And family lore was that the first time we went on a family vacation, and I was only 4 years old, we went in a cave and I never let it go. That's what my dad used to say, that I had caves on the brain, that I read everything that I ran across, and anytime we were on another family vacation and we saw a cave, I'd want to go in it. Well, my parents were good about indulging their kids' interests. And if you were interested, my dad used to say, I don't care what you're interested in, just be interested in something, or I'm going to find something for you to be interested in. And that usually meant clean out the gutters or, pick weeds and things I didn't want to do. So I read a lot, but, I was a little boy. And I was always thinking about where caves might be. I remember looking at hills, wondering if there were caves in there. Well, I still do, but I'm a lot better at knowing the right geology now. And then when I was a Boy Scout, at 13 years of age, we did a spelunking adventure. And we went into a cave on a farm in northern Kentucky. And the farmer told us that nobody had ever gone beyond where the cows stand and cool off in this cave. It had a big entrance that cows could stand in. And so he welcomed us to look around, and we crawled up through some rocks and came up to an upper level tunnel, and there were no footprints on the floor. And I'd read enough by then to know that meant nobody had ever found that before. Mm-hmm. And that was exciting, and that's when I really got after it, and here I am still doing it.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that was in 1962.
Wow. Okay, well, that's great. Bill is an author, and he has a couple of books out, and one of them is Huautla, 30 Years of Caving. And I would like for you to maybe explain to us here what speleology is and why it's important to us.
Sure. Well, speleology means the study of caves. I guess everybody knows that the Greek for study is L-O-G-Y, logy, and so speleology is just study of caves. But what's interesting about caves, to me at least, is that there's several disciplines within speleology, and something that we are addressing in with our project at Huautla and have through the years is to address all of the disciplines of speleology. And I'm talking about geology, and we had a master's thesis written on the geology of Sistema Huautla, and the geologist who did that was emailing me a couple hours ago, and he's coming in a couple of weeks, so we'll do a bit more work on that. Archaeology. There's been a master's thesis written on a site that we found within one of the caves, 2,000-year-old site, with artifacts left there. So we reported that to the Mexican government, and the right thing's been done with them. Paleontology. We discovered a paleontological site last year, and it's a significant one. And we've got a Mexican scientist coming to join us. So what we're doing right now that's maybe different from years past is we're doing everything we can to pull Mexican scientists in, and we'll support them in their research and their publications. So we want to see things published. There is a book titled Encyclopedia of Caves, and there's been 2 editions of that book. Beautiful, big book. Cost $100 through Amazon. But we were invited to write a chapter for that book on Sistema Huautla because of the fact that we've addressed all the various disciplines of speleology, and in an academic kind of way. But not that there's not adventure and daring and all that, because there is, to do a very deep cave. But you can also contribute to the body of knowledge while you're doing it.
Excellent.
That's a real interesting story right there.
Yeah,
that cave adapted troglodytic scorpion.
Troglodytic?
Troglodytic means that, cave adapted. So it's de-evolved. Its ancestors have been in a complete darkness and silence long enough that it doesn't have eyes anymore and no skin pigmentation.
Oh, wow. I would have looking at the picture, I would have assumed that it was just an albino because of no light, but the fact that it has evolved with no eyes, that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. The next question I have for you is if you could maybe explain the difference to us, the difference between a show cave and a wild cave.
Sure. A show cave has been developed for tours, so it's got paths and lights and and usually tour guides, and the majority of tour guides don't really understand the geology much. Normally, they start telling you how this formation looks like a porpoise and that one looks like something else, which I'm amused by when I take those tours, and I just go for the ride. But some tours aren't like that. Some tours, they really learn why the cave's there, how old the cave is, and understand the geology, and those are the ones I prefer. But I like all caves, so I'll go on a tour and not contradict anybody, just kind of go along for the ride, and not say much, but just listen. So a show cave is a cave that's open to the public, whereas a wild cave has not been modified and hasn't been improved. So there are, broken rocks you got to walk over, and in the case of, say, Huautla, there's very deep shafts that you got to rig with ropes. And the easy thing about a deep shaft is to get down it. It's a whole lot harder to get back up it.
Right.
So deep caving is like mountaineering in reverse. And I just came back from the Explorers Club annual dinner in New York City last night, and I talked to mountaineers, and it's interesting to talk with them. The people that have climbed Everest and K2 and a whole lot of the highest mountains in the world, because they agree that once you get to the summit, then you get back down, and that's a whole lot easier than getting up. Whereas the deep cave is the exact opposite of that. And in my experience, I've seen people that get overwhelmed with that fact, where they realize they've overextended themselves and they really don't think they can get out. And that's a matter of leadership in terms of talking with them, and you can't carry them out. They're going to have to get themselves out. So that makes it interesting sometimes. I'd rather that not happen, but sometimes it does.
Well, since you did bring this up, I was going to ask you about your experience this weekend at the Explorers Club. That was something like the 110th or 11th meeting of the Explorers.
111th, and it's...
And you were among some very stellar people there that were being honored.
Yeah. I got an award from them this year, Citation of Merit, it's called, and which allowed me to go to the podium and say something. And Neil deGrasse Tyson was right there and got an award, got a medal. And I'm a fan of his. Watch his TV show Cosmos, and
yes,
and
very engaging speaker.
And they gave us a ride over to the American Museum of Natural History, where the event was held, and I was sitting as close as you are to Buzz Aldrin on the way there.
Wow,
which was kind of cool because I'm a fan of Apollo and all.
Yes. Well, we're of an age group that were alive in 1969 when they stepped onto the moon, and so that I remember that July evening, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun, and I joined the Explorers Club a long time ago, actually in 1979, and that's when we were just beginning the Huautla exploration and wanted to make a long-term project of it and really do it right. Not just go once or twice, but go many years and do it thoroughly. And we weren't real sure how to get started raising support, getting help to do it. Like, for instance, rope is not cheap, and it takes a lot to do a deep cave. So we talked to a gentleman whose opinion we really trusted, and he said, join the Explorers Club, and he's a former president of the Explorers Club. And he said, that gives you credibility, and you build on that. So I've been a member for a long time, and I really enjoy it, mostly because of the people I get to meet.
It's amazing. Okay. Well, let's shift the conversation to the Sistema Huautla and this project that you're working on, and perhaps you could tell us when you first heard of it and how you when you first went there, and talk about what kind of a cave it is, and just give us a little background on this particular project.
I first heard of it in the 60s, and in 68 to be exact. And I was a gung-ho vertical caver, but had only been doing shafts in caves for a couple of years at that point. And I wanted to do the deepest pit in the United States. And I went and did it, and I happened to run into a guy there who had just found a deeper one. So he said, well, come see the one I just found. And it hadn't been publicized whatsoever. And that's Ellison's Cave, Georgia. It's incredible. You know, you've probably seen pictures of multi-flash shots up a 500-foot shaft.
Mm-hmm.
It's as deep as the Washington Monument is high. So I went and did that cave with him in the spring of '69, and he had been to Huautla the year before on a Canadian expedition. So I found out about Huautla and learned that it was the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere. And that sort of gave me the idea to start going to Mexico. So I did in 1970, and I've been going steadily ever since. My first trip to Huautla was in 1977. There was a hiatus between 1970 and 76 when nobody went there because the Canadians that had gone in '68 thought it was done. They thought they'd finished it. And it was 600 meters deep, just over 2,000 feet deep, and about 3.5 miles long. But they published a map with a question mark on it. And on cave maps, if you publish a map with a question mark on it, that means we're not sure whether there's a passage that continues or not. So I went to the National Convention of Cavers, the National Speleological Society Convention in '76, and some of those Canadian guys were there. And I had a copy of the map, and I sat down at a campfire with them, and I said, tell me about that question mark. And they said, well, it was a long, what we call a death march trip. It was like 36 hours long with no sleep. And the last 10 hours of that was climbing up ropes. It really beat us up. And the next morning, we couldn't remember exactly what we'd seen. We just saw what we drew. And that was, we didn't see a wall. So maybe behind a corner there was an additional passage, but there was an overhung climb, and nobody could climb it. So that was reason enough for my friends and I to say, let's go do the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere and check that out. But then, just given the way things were going at the time, and I was living in Indiana, I didn't make that trip when they were going to go see and go climb that climb. Well, they climbed that climb, and the bottom line of what occurred is a cave that was 2,000 feet deep and 3.5 miles long is now 5,000 feet deep and 45 miles long, really because of that question mark.
Right.
That wasn't the end of it, by any means.
Right.
That was really kind of the beginning of it. So they were true to the way to do a cave map and put in a question mark, and then we were the guys that followed them. So we went steadily from 76 to 94, almost every year, sometimes more than once. I know in 77 I went 3 times. But then in 80, being 31 years old at the time, it was probably time to sink my teeth into something and maybe have a career, because I graduated from college 7 years before, and all I'd done was go on caving expeditions through the 70s, so maybe, if I'm ever going to have any kids and all that stuff. So I did that, and I just retired from that last September, and I had a really good career with the Boy Scouts of America and made it to the national level and influenced things across the whole country, which I feel great about. But the whole time, I managed to use my vacation to keep going back there up to 94. 94 was sort of the year when we said, well, we've been after this for 18, 19 years now. And using all your vacation for something like that isn't necessarily the best thing for marriage and whatever, So we said, well, maybe we'll cool it for a while. And from 94 up through 2 years ago, 2013, that's almost 20 years. We went back a couple of times, but I went to China, and I went to, other areas in Mexico, and other friends went to Europe and wherever to go in caves. And I've explored the longest cave in Texas in those years and so on. But then 2 years ago, I was contacted by these hotshot British cavers, younger, very, very skilled, been exploring deep caves in Europe, and they said, we want to go to Huautla, and we want to go to the bottommost point that you guys reached in 94, the big sump, the mother of sumps, Sump 9, and we're good cave divers. So I helped them in every way they asked me to. Logistically, every detail, who to rent a house from, what rope lengths you need, everything. And then I asked them if I could join them. So I went for the last 2 weeks of their expedition in 2013 just to go back. And also I knew where a possible passage was I wanted to check out. And it was really a good find. and it was about 3,000 feet long and beautifully decorated, and just a joy to be the first person into it. And then Tommy Shiflett was on that expedition with me, and we caved together in Huautla in the 80s many times, and he's like the big name in cave exploration in the East. He's from Virginia, and he's been to China more times than I have. And we just admitted to each other that we love this place. Let's start this back up. So in the airport in Oaxaca, I've even got a picture of the napkin laying there. I mean, just classic, like you hear about songs being written. We drew out the objectives of a restarted project, which we gave a Spanish name to this time, Proyecto Speleologist and Sistema Huautla, which means the speleological project of Sistema Huautla. And when I still worked at the Boy Scouts, I had a graphic designer play around with the design, and that's really neat, I think. And so what we said we were going to do is go 10 years in a row for a month each year and just finish it up. Leave no question marks on the maps. Last year was the first year of that. And I'll admit that a couple of things weren't done exactly right. One thing was that we had some people drive down, because there's a lot of stuff to get down there. I'm going to do it the next 3 days to drive there. And they were going to go caving for a week. Well, we didn't have any houses rented. We didn't have any kitchens set up. And so these guys are only there for a week. They want to go caving, and we're just dealing with the local government. So this year we're going in stages. There are those of us that are going now, but that's only like 6 people. And we'll rent the houses. We'll deal with the local government and so forth, set up the kitchen, buy the groceries. And then in a few days, rope riggers show up, and they'll be rigging ropes to get things ready for the cave divers when they come, and so on. So it's going to, we learned some lessons. But I was still working last year, too. I could only manage a month of vacation, but now I can do what I want.
To be a professional explorer, could you talk about that a little bit, and how it allows you to, or how you pick your teams and funding and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the guy in charge of the team. Tommy Shiflett and I are co-leaders, so we've got different duties. And he's an engineer, so he's taken on the surmountable work of taking care of all the data, because we've got 13,000 survey stations, and keeping track of all that and drafting the maps, and also ordering technical climbing gear and all that stuff. My duties, I did some fundraising, found some supporters. I've maintained the contact with a rope manufacturer through the years, so we get donations of rope from Pigeon Mountain Industries, which makes caving rope.
Wonderful.
PMI. And in fact, I was even worried about that, because the president of the company, one of the founders, is a very dear friend of mine from like age 20. And he passed away last year. So that worried me that there goes my connection. So that's not what happened, because they knew darn well that we're connected, because they got pictures of our cave exploration up in the corporate offices of the company. They were happy about that. I've gotten off topic.
It's okay. You talked about how you divided the labor of
in terms of the people.
Yes.
We said when we were in Huautla last year, our first expedition of what we see as 10, that we would name the team in September. Well, there's a reason for that. One, that's when you really got to start nailing your plan down and getting commitments out of people, because here we are in March and we're going. So that's about the right amount of time. It's easy to say, yeah, I'm going to go. But then when it comes to really going or putting your money in, that's when you find out who's really not going to go, I give a presentation. We're obligated as an official project to give a report of some kind to the national organization. So that can either be a written report or can be a slideshow, a presentation. And my part-time job now is as a public speaker about caves, and I've got a speakers bureau representing me. So I just do that. It's something I like doing. So I give a presentation at the National Convention. Well, that's going to get a lot of people wanting to go. And so I keep their names, and then I contact them about a month later and say, how serious are you? And one thing that we're really aiming to do right now, and we're successful this time, is to bring in younger people. People in their 20s. That's when I started going to Huautla, and it's going to take that for it to carry on for another 10 years. So we got a really solid team. We got some, probably the age range is most likely something like 22 to 66.
Excellent. Well, one of the things that you talked about in that last segment that really sparked my interest was when you spoke about coming into this new room that had not been seen before, and about the beauty of it and the things that you saw. Could you discuss that a little bit, and about how does that inspire you to always go further and look for more, or even just go back to that room to see?
Well, in my life, there's nothing that has been more of a delight than finding unexplored passages in caves. In fact, that very book right there, I know that there's a line in there that talks about one day of grand discovery, when I said in that book that it stood right up there with the birth of my children, you know, that day. And that's to say a lot, you know, because it was what I wanted to have happen, and now it's happening. And you got to realize that when it's happening, that this is what you wanted and you're getting it right now, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, I was in a cave in Texas a few years ago, and we discovered just a beautiful big passage with a stream down the floor. We were mapping it, and I turned around to my friend and I said, "Who gets to do this?" And he goes, "We do." And I realized, that's right. We're the ones doing it. Not that many people get to go somewhere that nobody's been before. And in fact, I spoke to the Explorers Club Saturday night, and I was free to say whatever I wanted. You know, they didn't approve my script. And I said to them, because the room's full of polar explorers and space people and astronauts and undersea people, I said, to me, caves are the purest form of exploration, because you don't know until you go. You can't use satellite photos except to find an entrance or a possible entrance. You can't use robots, but I did say not yet, because it's coming. And there's a guy right here in Austin, Bill Stone, that's got a underwater robot that he's developed for NASA that he wants to take down there where the Brits went 2 years ago and send it on in there, you know. Mm-hmm. And now there are a handful of us having this philosophical discussion as to whether that counts. Because you've always said in deep caves that a human has to stretch the survey tape. Well, what if you built the robot and it went and it came back and reported? Well, you know, it's changing the rules. So
my friends that have summited some of the highest mountains in the world always say, you can get there, but you have to get back before you can prove it.
Right. I know, yeah.
So it is that human experience.
But let me say one more thing about just being there when you find what you're looking for. And I get asked all the time, well, what are you looking for? What I'm looking for is the experience. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for treasure. I'm not looking for gold. I'm not looking for something I'm going to haul out and sell. I'm looking for the experience. And I've had a life rich with them, you know, of cave exploration experiences. What I wanted, I've gotten, and wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been good. And I look forward to it happening now, again, soon, next week.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the team itself, and about not the logistics, but the human factor of this, the fact of who all is on the team, and what, and in this case, we've had a lot of speleologists on this trip in the past, but now it seems like there's other science disciplines that are involved, and they come from different parts of the world.
Well, first of all, the most basic qualification is that you know what you're doing, that you've got your own gear, because everybody's got to have their own gear. They've got to have their own caving gear, and that varies, because like the clothes you wear varies given whether you're going to be swimming in water or not, or you know, camping underground or whatever. So everybody's got to be equipped. And when I hear from somebody and I don't know them, I've been around long enough to know what caves they've done. And I've probably done them since I've done 2,500 or whatever, some number like that. And most of them are in the United States. So, if they're saying, well, I'm ready for Huautla and I want to go with you guys, I'll say, well, what are the deeper caves you've done? What's the longest trip you've taken? Do you know how to survey? And I had a guy, I think it was August, that heard about it, saw the Men's Journal article, wanted to come, said he's a very active caver. Well, it turned out the longest trip he'd ever taken was 6 hours. And he'd only done a couple of shafts. And I wrote that guy and said, we're hearing from people that are way more qualified than you, so get after it and contact us in a couple of years. We'll see, But build up that resume more. But then I specifically targeted some people too, like especially accomplished photographers this time, because we're going to go into a section of the cave, which is the Sótano de San Agustín section, where Amphitrite Hall is, the room on the back of this book it's half again the size of a dome stadium,
with the 7 flash across.
Then that's the best picture that's ever been taken in there. Wow. There can be better. And then the upper gorge and the lower gorge, and gorges with waterfalls all the way down, and there's only a handful of good pictures. And then Mexican scientist, because we've got the scorpion expert of the world, and there's a scorpion right there on the cover of this book, a troglodytic scorpion, cave-adapted scorpion. We collected that back in 1980 and had never heard of that. What? There's a troglodytic scorpion? Never heard of that. Well, it turned out nobody had. That's the first one. And I tracked down who the scorpion expert of the United States was. Turned out he was a Mexican PhD biologist who had a faculty job at Texas Tech for 10 years. Wow. And so we sent that specimen to him, and he wrote back and said, you found a mature female. Please look for another one. I need a mature male to be able to identify it. And I wrote back and said, how poisonous do you think they are? And he said, because I've been stung by scorpions, and it's a searing, awful pain,
It is indeed.
And here I am camping in a cave with them. And he said, well, they don't need to be very poisonous, given the little invertebrates that they're probably stinging eat. But then again, Mother Nature sometimes, doesn't make sense. He said, so if anybody gets stung, keep notes. He actually said that. And we haven't had to do that yet.
Great scientific minds.
and he came last year with 3 graduate students. He joined us for a week. And I never met him face to face before. We corresponded through the years. And turns out he does work for a pharmaceutical company. He is the guy on the subject of anti-venom for scorpions. And to this day, 50,000 people a year die of scorpion stings in mostly the Middle East. So he is flown all around. And here we find new species. We found one new species of scorpion. He got all excited about that because they'll analyze the venom, and maybe there's a key there to a better anti-venom. He came for 1 week last year with 3 students, and he's coming back this year for more time because they found 6 new species of troglodytic cave life in 4 days. And the reason for that is that these caves are isolated from any other caves. Mm. So they got their own evolutionary environment. Everything seems to be unique within those caves.
So species are almost all endemic to the location.
All right. Wow. So and we got this paleontologist coming, and he's already said that we found a Pleistocene ground sloth, and just from the pictures we sent him, and that's going to expand the known range of those from during the ice ages, which paleontologists get all excited about. That's pretty neat.
Wonderful. Okay, Bill, how about let's talk about what are the qualities that make a good deep caver and how long you spend down there when you go typically, And how long was the longest you've ever stayed underground in an expedition?
I'll start with that. The longest I've ever stayed underground without coming out is 13 days. And that was from a deep underground camp. So the reason you do a deep underground camp is if a cave stair steps down very deep, and on our website, our project website, which is peshcaving.org, PESH is the acronym for the project, PESH caving.org, there's a graphic you can find there of a profile view of the cave system with 4 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other like that for scale. That's how deep it is. That's really deep, over 5,000 feet. So you can't explore from the surface down that deep and then explore and map something, come back out. You can't do it. It's too far. You got to camp there. So when we get to a point where we realize we've got to camp, then we look for the right place to camp, and that's got to be where you can comfortably sleep, where there's water right there, and where you can dig a latrine. It really comes down to that, those things. And I've got friends that have stayed underground a little longer, but I don't like to more than maybe max 13 days again. I've camped underground in China in the last few years a couple of times. They were like 8 days or 10 days. One thing I found years ago, and I've got some scars on one of these arms here, there they are, I took a slight fall on the way into an underground camp, so I'm on my way in to stay for 10 days. And I lacerated myself. You don't heal very well in a cave. So I just kept cleaning those out and trying to stave off infection, but it didn't heal till I got back out to sunlight. And it just healed right up. So that's one thing, is the sun's good for you in terms of healing and that kind of thing. We're prepared to have 2 different camps underground at the same time with underground camping food, underground sleeping bags. Now, what's an underground sleeping bag? Well, it's synthetic filled, because you wouldn't take down in a cave. It's 100% humid. So it wouldn't keep insulating, keep its loft. So we've got lightweight sleeping bags because it's 60 degrees Fahrenheit, constant temperature in there. So we've got sleeping pads and we've got sleeping bags, and these sleeping bags can be stuffed into a 1-gallon Nalgene bottle. And I'm hauling down now 10 brand new Nalgene bottles that we bought specifically for sleeping bags. Because it takes strong fingers to get them stuffed in there, but you can swim and whatever and be confident that your sleeping bag's not getting wet. Because if you get there and your sleeping bag's wet, you got a problem because you can't get back out. And I could sit here and tell you plenty of stories about when things like that have happened. One time I was going to get out of a cave. I didn't take a sleeping bag. I was planning to climb back out. Well, then I was mistaken. I stayed too long. I couldn't get back out. So I had to wake somebody up and ask them if I could crawl in there with them. That's the way I met somebody one time. It was that way.
That's a fine how do you do.
Hey, wake up. Now, how does somebody qualify, or what kind of person am I looking for? I'm looking for somebody that's into it. Somebody that's already doing it.
Right.
Somebody that's gung-ho about it, loves it like I did, or do. And they want more, and they want to go to the big leagues, because that's what this is, It's got a reputation. They want to go climb Everest, But in a way, this is different, because Everest has been climbed by who knows how many people, You're going to get into something nobody's done before, so you're going to go beyond where people have gone before. And one thing I said when I got to go to the podium at the Explorers Club Saturday night, and I didn't mean to be, poking at them any, but I told them that caves are different, It's just more pure because you got to go. It's like Columbus, you got to go there. Right. He had all kinds of theories about what they're going to find, but.
So the skill set, the skill set includes what people often think of as climbing skills, being able to rappel and being able to down climb and those kind of things.
And be able to climb back up a rope.
Climb back up a rope.
Yeah, up a rope. That's the thing that differentiates it from, say, rock climbing or even mountaineering. Though mountaineers, on a big mountain, they will use the cinders and they'll slide them up.
Right.
But watch these guys on these big walls. When they follow a lead climber, it just makes me wince. Usually, the terrible technique they use. It's just really inefficient. Oh, it makes me wonder why they don't adopt caving techniques. I mean, imagine climbing a 400-foot rope, 40-story building,
Straight,
and not
vertical.
being worn out when you get there. Because these climbers use this terribly inefficient technique where it's all upper arms. If you got your technique down, it's all your legs. And so if somebody wants to come with us, I ask them if, you got your own gear, right? Tell me what you got. And I sent somebody, a friend of mine was living in France recently, and she wanted to go caving in China with the people I have. And I said, well, just answer their questions. Well, one question she answered wrong, I guess, and she wasn't welcome to come. And I said, you shouldn't have said that. And that was, that she has a rope walker technique. Well, that's what they use in Tennessee and Alabama, but you'd never use that in China because over there they're using strictly European technique. And that just sort of kept her from being able to go.
Sweet. Describe that difference between the caving techniques, because things have evolved or changed or since the beginning of your explorations in the caves. And there was a lot of vertical rope climbing and rappelling to descend and things. So now there's new techniques. I heard you just then refer to European technique.
Yeah, which is most usually called the frog, and it was developed in France. So the beginning of single rope technique, meaning you're just rigging one rope down a shaft and you're rappelling it and climbing back up, it actually originated in the United States in the 60s. And I was involved with that in the late 60s. And the best ropes then were like a laid gold line, which spins, bounces a lot. And then kern mantle rope started being developed, and static kern mantle, which means it's got a very tight abrasion-resistant exterior, and the tensile strength's the core in the middle, the inside. And then they figured out how to construct them so that they don't spin and they don't stretch much. That's a static rope. So those are caving ropes for the most part. That's why they were developed in the beginning, but that's not their big market. So now the people that use them are like offshore oil rigs and rescues, people like that. Window washers do. So some British guys came over here, and one stayed with me for a while in the early 70s, and then the mid 70s when I lived in Austin. Went back to Europe, and they said, hey, we need to do this single rope technique. It's a lot more efficient. We don't have to carry all these ladders and ropes too. We can just go with ropes. The problem they had was their ropes aren't as good as our ropes, and so they couldn't just rig them at the top of a shaft and go all the way to the bottom because they were worried that they'd rub up against something sharp. So they came up with this technique of intermediate anchors. They call them rebelays. So that's tricky. If you rappel down and the rope's tied to the wall, how do you pass that and keep going? So there's a technique of doing that. You essentially take your rappelling device off and then put it back on. So you got to be clipped in. Well, so you ought to see somebody that's really fast and good at it. It's just amazing. I'm pretty good, but there's better. And it's pretty neat to see somebody just rappel down to one of those and they're past it, gone. It's cool. So we're going to have a practice course set up on the basketball court right there in the village we're staying in, because it's covered with a metal cover and we can rig ropes. So we'll just have everybody show us that they know how to efficiently pass rebelays, and then there's other things that you got to be able to get past while you're on the ropes. So I'm pretty confident everybody coming knows what they're doing. So this woman I was telling you about going to China, she said, well, I got a rope walker too. Really, that's for a long climb and free fall. Meaning the rope just hangs out in free space. You're not going to have a rebelay, and you want something efficient. And some of those rigs, everything's down here, one on an ankle, one on a knee. But if you get to a place where the rope's tied off up a shaft, pretty hard to reach your ankle. So this frog technique, everything's right here, up high.
Right. All right, so let's maybe kind of work towards the end of this here by talking about a couple of things. One would sort of be the if there was one thing that you could accomplish on this particular expedition, what would it be? And how would you describe the goal of the trip?
Okay, great. The goals are to add to the known extent of the cave system. In fact, we've even set a numerical goal that in the next 10 years, we'll take the length of the cave, which is currently at 68 kilometers, which is 44 miles, thereabouts, to 100. Now, why 100? Well, it's 3 digits, nice, even number. And that's a lofty goal because that increases it by 50%. I think it's there. It's a big, vast cave system. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, there's areas where we think there are tributaries coming into the big stream at the very bottom, because the cave is formed, or this cave at least, is formed like a tree. The higher you go, the smaller the branches are. The deeper you go, the bigger the trunk is. And it feeds in. It's a dendritic pattern. And so there's certain areas of the tree that we haven't gotten to, though we know water comes from over there. So one of the biggest objectives is to dive this sump, and a sump means to us, in cave terminology, it means water to the ceiling. So there is a big, beautiful, deep blue sump that nobody's ever entered. It was found in 1980. Nobody's ever been back to it since. So that's why the camp in San Agustín with the divers, where we're going to put the camp, they're like 30 minutes from it. So once they're settled, they're going to do it the next day. And then what? Well, we expect it to open up a whole new section. And at the same time, we will have people on the surface looking for a way down into it. And we've had 2 very young whiz kid GIS experts studying Google Earth, because there's new tools available today. And they've been studying Google Earth, that area, looking for what looks like it might be a cave entrance. And I say looks like because there's canopies of trees.
Right.
So they see a real black place. It could just be the shadows of that time of day when they took the shot, or it's a cave entrance. So we need to walk and see. We've actually got 2 areas, maybe even 3, where we're going to do that to add to the cave system. And then we want to add to the depth because it's one of the deepest caves in the world. So let's see how deep it is. And if we were to max it out, in other words, what the geology says the highest entrance it could be the 2nd deepest cave in the world. Wow. It could be 1,830 meters deep. And the thing about Huautla, Sistema Huautla, is that cave is so old that you can actually go to the tippy top of a ridge and find an entrance. And you wonder, how did that get there? Where did the water come from that carved this out? The answer is, that's not where the ground's always been. It used to be a lot higher than that. And it's so old that it's gotten eroded down and exposed the cave. So we want to get up to the highest possible ground. But the difficulty there is that you have to do diplomacy, because where the highest ground is happens to be where the most isolated Indian people around there live. Mm-hmm. And we took them on head on, face to face with a smile last year to be diplomats. And they asked me in a meeting in somebody's house with everybody listening for my answer and 2 translators in between us, such questions as, so what if we let you go in the cave and it upsets the cave spirits and our kids get sick? Tough question when all these people are listening for the answer. And you got to have an answer. You can't, you're not going to get anywhere if you just say, that's not going to happen. So what we said was, well, we've been going in those caves down the slope of the mountain here for 30 some years. And not only have the kids not gotten sick, but a lot of them have prospered. And some of them have gone off to college. And there's a physician in Mexico City that lived in that little village and used to hang out with us. We'd bring him books. And so we've got a plan, a PR plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm driving down right now with a National Park Service Visitor Center quality display that's going to go in the local government building there, so that the people that live there, when they go to get a permit to whatever it is they got to do, a license or whatever they got to go to the government building, there's going to be this eye-catching display that's going to show them what it's really like in the caves, and maybe try to eventually dispel their superstitions, because that's what it is. They don't know. They just know that they're dangerous to them because they don't have the kind of lights we have, or the kind of equipment we have.
Okay. We talked about some of the goals and one of your, but it sounds to me like exploration in this case doesn't have a specific end goal. It has some theoretical goals. Sounds like it's always exploratory, like you don't exactly know what you're going to find. And,
sure.
And if you will go further or in one direction or another. Is that always part of the adventure of caving, is no one's been there before, so you don't know what you will find?
Exactly, sure. You don't know. I mean, you can know caves real well, and you got a real good idea what you're going to find. But you don't know exactly what you're going to find till you go there. And then Huautla throws surprises at you. I mean, you think you got the geology figured out, and then you find something like that immense room that doesn't make any sense. Why is this here? Well, it turns out that there's a series of those big, gigantic rooms, and they probably are the oldest part of the cave, and they were formed beneath the water table before the mountain uplifted. I mean, they're incredibly old and very stable. I mean, there's like 6 acres of floor with no rock on it, and there was a standing lake there at one time. There's big mud cracks, extremely old. Yeah, that's part of the delight of it in exploring such a place, is you don't know what's going to find. And as the expedition goes by, I'll sit here and predict that around April the 10th, we're going to get reports in from underground camps, and we're going to know where we are. And then we got to decide what's next. Either this opened up and now we need to put a team on the other side of a sump and camp over there, or nothing happened. We need to switch locations and go over here. So that's part of the great pleasure of it, is altering your plans as you go.
Well, Bill, I really would like to thank you for coming and spending this time with us today and letting us know what your inspiration was, and to also help explain to us what your challenges are and the goals. This is a beautiful, wonderful project. I wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you.
And in the underworld, sir.
That's my world.
Yes, sir.